Well, hello guys, welcome back to John's Workshop. This is episode 16 and we're going to call this episode My New Mill, A Big Reveal. So you'll see here we've got the mill, so thank you to everybody who have a suggestion in terms of what it might be and where it might be from. So it's finally arrived. Not the best arrival. We had horrendous rain, thunderstorms yesterday. We've got some more today. When I got back from work last night, this was sat outside in the most torrential downpour and lightning everywhere. So and we live on top of a hill, so it was the safest thing was just to leave it. So once that had cleared, we got it into the shop. It was wrapped in some black plastic, so we got that off, and it's still sat inside. The wooden box is quite wet and damp, so I'll bring you on to that as we start to get. I want to get the box off it really, just to get the damp environment from around the mill as soon as possible. So I'm filming this on Tuesday. So here we go. So thanks to all those that gave a suggestion in terms of what you thought it might be, and we'll do the reveal now. So I think it's time for a drum roll. So here we go. I used to be a drummer. This is all I've got left of my drum stuff. So I've got the sticks. This is the nearest thing to a drum we're going to get. So we'll have a go with this. So drum roll please. So there you go guys. It's Cormac. So I went back with Cormac again. So that was that's the big reveal out of the way. Bit of a laugh as usual. I'll go into why Cormac in a while. So I'll just adjust the tripod, just bear with me a minute. So the lucky winner of the most pointless competition on YouTube is Bacon Butty Bash. So well done, you were the closest. You didn't get the name Cormac, but you were the only one that suggested the Polish machine, so I take that as close enough to the suggestion. So yeah, we've gone back with Cormac again. I'll dig into the reasons why. So I've been impressed with the bandsaw. You know, I've used it a lot now. I've used it for the bench, I've used it for various other bits and pieces. What I have been doing is I've been using it, and I've not filmed any of this, is various times I've taken cuts, I've been measuring the verniers and stuff and just checking, and the accuracies straight out of the box without any adjustment has been bang on. It's doing what it should do. I'm impressed by the rigidity of it, so that's one reason. You know, I've got a level of confidence from the bandsaw. Because I knew I wanted a mill, I went back to Cormac and spoke to their export manager in Poland, who was very helpful, and suggested that I may want to purchase a mill and what sort of type and size of mill it was I was looking at, and just narrowing things down slightly. You know, ideally would have loved a Bridgeport. That was always going to be first choice. For the money that I'd got to spend, and when you start looking at what's available for that kind of money, I was just going to buy somebody else's problems, and decided against it just based on that. So I then started looking at sort of next best things, which is the sort of Chinese or Asian copies of Bridgeport style turret mills. They are, you know, significantly more expensive than what I paid for this. You're talking double, if not treble, the cost. When I looked at the actual capacity of the mill, the size of the table, the length of travel in X and Y, and in the quill, there's not really a lot of benefit over what I've bought here. I've looked at Chester, I've looked at Warco, I've looked at Cormac, I've looked at Axminster, so I've been through the whole range of available options really, Toolco. This mill has got, of all of them, in the price range that I'm dealing with, has got the longest X-axis travel, it's got the longest quill travel, it's Cormac again. I went through a load of questions with the export manager technical questions around the fact it's a 3-phase machine. I was thinking of using a VFD originally, so I needed to understand whether the motor had both star and delta, because you need both to be able to use a VFD. So there was a whole host of technical questions that I asked the export manager, and on every question within an hour the export manager had been back to the technical team in Cormac and got straight back to me with a response and an answer, and I was impressed by that. Turnaround time on questions has been good. Also, I said, you know, I'm doing the YouTube channel, I'll be doing a full review of the mill, unboxing, build, and for good or for bad I'll just tell it how it is. They were comfortable with that. They viewed the reviews that I've done on the saw, and they liked what they saw, you know, in that respect. So I said, you know, as a repeat customer, can we talk about price? Is there anything we can do on price? And you know, there was some movement on price as well, which was good. So, you know, always up. They've been fantastic to deal with. I placed the order on Friday, and the mill arrived not the following Monday, but the Monday after that. So it took basically just over a week to come from the sort of far eastern edges of Poland to the UK. Again, it's arrived boxed. Apart from the weather issues we had, there was another box on top of here that was wrapped up, that's got the stand unit. I took all of that apart last night just because it had got wet, and I wanted to get those bits and pieces out of the box, wiped down, dried off, and some WD-40 all over the areas where I couldn't dry it off fully, to make sure I'd got rid of all the moisture. So that was part of last night. I'll show you that bit in a while. So yeah, they're all the reasons I've gone with Cormac. It really came down to two machines for me. Once I decided, I wasn't going to go for a Bridgeport or a Tom Senior or one of those other type of, the old sort of English style of mill. I looked at Cormac and also Warco's GH Universal. Now Warco's GH Universal, same size machine, similar sort of price, got a slight advantage on Y-axis travel. So the Y-axis travel on that was 30mm longer, I think, than this has got. But when I compared this to Chester and Axminster and some of the others at the same sort of price range, this has got a far bigger Y-axis on it and a far bigger table dimension. So this rightly or wrongly, I've made the decision. It's here now, and there's no going back. So here it is. So what I'm going to do now, and what I want to do fairly readily, is get all this boxing off, because it was all quite damp. I think the mill inside's quite dry, but it's obviously sat on a wet through pallet and in the garage. I don't want to leave it sat like that for a week, because inside this box it's going to be quite a damp environment. So I want to get this unboxed, and then the build video will be probably nearer towards the weekend, and it will probably be tagged onto this video as I get to that point. So well done, Bacon Butty Bash. You're the lucky winner of absolutely nothing, so well done for that. I'll grab a load of tools and I'll bring you back, and we'll start getting this box undone and see what we've got inside. So on with the unboxing, guys. This is the stuff that I unboxed last night. So this is the stand that the mill will sit on. So it's already been unboxed, and that was obviously because of the damp that was in there last night from the rain. So they've all been taken out, just wiped over with a rag, took the moisture off, quick spray of WD just in the corners and in the folded over joints where I can't get a rag in to get the moisture out. And so there's various bits there, two side bits, a front and a back, and a top panel basically, and some shelves. So that's been unboxed already. In with that came the instruction manual, and I've been through that. It's not as good as the one I got for the bandsaw in terms of translation. The translation's slightly worse, but it's readable. You can understand what it means. So there's information in there, same as before with the bandsaw. There's the usual health and safety stuff at the front, and then it goes on talking about unpacking and checking and what's in the box, you know, the main structure, how it's built, what's inside it. So inside the head itself, it's a geared head machine, so it runs through a gearbox from the main motor, and that's for your obviously different speed selections. And then it goes into sort of operation of the mill, various different bits and pieces, a bit about the oil that's in the head, the gearbox oil, and how to change it and when to change it, troubleshooting guide, general assembly of all the bits and pieces, same for the head, so a complete breakdown of all the, you know, the gears and shafts and everything else that's in the head and the selectors, parts list, head parts list. So, you know, it's reasonable. Some of the, like I say, some of the translation's a little bit sketchy, but it's readable. You can understand it. So that's that. I'd already unboxed that. I'll crack on now with the main event, which is the actual mill itself in the big box. So I'll just spin the camera around and bring you back, and we'll get into the box and see what's inside. Right then, guys, on with the main event. Let's get into the box. I've got the gloves back on. Obviously, this has been through various different places over the last 3 or 4 days on its journey, various different ports, and our friends at UK Borders and Customs decided they were going to have a go at it as well, which looks like they've made a bit of a mess around the back of the box, obviously trying to see if there was anything organic inside. So they put some tape over the box, you know, UK Borders and Customs, that just their signature of we've wrecked your packaging kind of thing. So I'll cut away now to a time lapse as I get stuck into this, and we'll get the box off it and see what's inside, and welcome return of the claw hammer. So that will be put to good use again. So I'll bring you back with a time lapse. Well, there we go, guys. That's the main event unwrapped. So inside the box it's fully assembled, other than obviously the base, which needs to go underneath it. There's a toolbox. Let's get that out. We'll have a look in there in a bit and see what goodies are in there. And then, so just general quick look around, you know, it's what I was expecting. It's the right model, it's the right type, it's 3-phase, which is what I was expecting. It's surprisingly bigger than I was expecting, chunkier, that's what I mean. It's probably height wise and length wise kind of what I thought, but it definitely looks beefy. And it's liberally coated with plenty of oil. There's some wax paper over the entire table surface to protect the table, which is good. Everything's, you know, a real, and I mean very generous, liberal coating of some red looking oil grease type stuff over all the sort of bare surfaces that aren't painted. The good news is there's no water got in there, which is fantastic after last night's rain, so I'm pleased about that. And also that the dampness in the base pallet doesn't seem to have soaked through and is around that base unit, which is also good. So at least now the air can get to it. It's not trapped inside a box that could have had damp inside, which I'm pleased about. So that's got the air around it. So what I'm going to do now is I'll just get into the box quickly and see what we get in terms of accessories, and I'll probably do that up on the bench. That'll be far easier than squatting down at the floor level. And then the next thing really is to start then trying to work out, and here comes the difficult bit, how I'm going to get this off the base. This weighs 360 kilograms, this unit on its own, and the base is another 40 kilograms, so it's 400 kilograms in total. The base is easy because it's sectional, it's in bits, I can build that, that's no problem. This is 360 kilograms, my crane's rated to 250 kilograms, and as much as I think the crane will lift more than 250, the fact that I've got no purpose-built slings, I'm going to be reliant on bits of rope and things like that. Slightly unconfident, if I'm honest, about trying to lift this with the crane. So I need to have a think and a real good stare at this in terms of how we get that off the pallet and then built up onto the base once I've got the base built. So obviously one of the first jobs is going to be build the base, get that built so that's ready, and then I need to decide how I'm going to manage this. And I think at this distance I've two choices. I can either strip the thing down so the head unit will probably come off, and I can probably use the crane to get that off, providing I'm comfortable with where I'm going to lift it, that I'm not going to risk any damage. And then the actual back unit, the sort of column, if you like, that's bolted to the base will also separate, and then I think the base and the table would stay as one, so three main pieces, all of which the crane will be capable of lifting within its capacity. That said, there's no lifting eye holes that I've seen yet, and even if there was, I don't have any lifting eyes. So all of that is filling me with a little bit of apprehension, if I'm honest. And the last thing I want to do is try and do a dodgy lift on this and something slip and spin and it drop on the floor, or worse, crush my fingers or feet. So I'm going to need to have a bit of a think about how we do this. And I might well ditch the crane idea completely, and I might use the pallet truck and a series of blocks and steps and wooden blocks to gradually lift it, put some blocks underneath, drop it onto the blocks, get some higher timber underneath the pallet truck, pump it up another level, put some more blocks underneath, and gradually lift it up in that fashion until I've got it to the height of the base, and then shuffle it across onto the base. That sounds dead simple, but I'm sure it won't be. I'm more inclined to go with that. I'm going to give this some thought overnight. I'm not going to rush into this, so I'll give that some thought overnight, and I'll probably start planning the lifts through the night, and I'll think about it maybe tomorrow night and gradually start working on it. But the main thing today was to get the box off it and let the air get to it, just in case there was any moisture in there. So I'll bring you back in a moment, and we'll get the toolbox up on the bench, and we'll have a bit of a look and see what's inside there. Right, so here we are at the bench then, guys. This didn't come with it, by the way. Shame, but didn't. Anyway, we've got the toolbox that came with it, and I also found this hidden away around the back. And this is a face mill. I've not had the box open yet, but Taizahushi hanged something or other Kogsny, all very Polish. I don't think so. So that's interesting. So they're obviously importing bits and pieces for the mill from Asia, if not all of the mill from Asia. I'm not sure on that yet. So there's a face mill. So what I didn't say is this mill's got a Morse taper 4 spindle, and that was another reason for me going for this, because obviously the lathe's Morse taper as well, both ends, spindle end and tailstock end. And I was just thinking, rather than go down a whole another route of different collets like R8s or whatever else. If I go Morse taper, then everything that I get for the mill, obviously everything on the lathe is Morse taper 3, but anything that's Morse taper 3 or less that I get for the mill will also fit the lathe, so dual purpose. So we've got an Asian face mill, quite an interesting looking thing. Never seen one that looks quite like that before. Triangular inserts, 5 flutes, all held in with very basic Allen keys holding the inserts into the seats. Yeah, that's interesting. I've never seen that sort of configuration before. So we'll just, it's absolutely smothered in oil, which is a good thing, I guess. So it's Morse taper 4. Now, I think it's an M16 thread for the drawbar. I'm not sure yet, but we'll do a bit of investigation on that. But just very quickly, this is 80mm diameter face mill. So didn't actually know that this was coming with the mill, if I'm honest, so slight bonus. Although we've yet to see how well that performs. The geometry of the inserts, how they present themselves to the workpiece is questionable, but I'm sure it will, for light cuts it will be okay. If you look at the bottom of the mill, the distance between the tip itself and the bottom of the mill there's probably not a lot there. There's probably only, I don't know, 1.5mm, 60th, something like that, projection of the inserts. But I'm sure for small facing cuts that'll be okay. Taper looks to be in reasonable condition, no rust or anything like that. So we'll just pop that back in its box. That's one of the accessories. And now we'll get on with the main toolbox and see what's in here. So, 3 aluminium handles. So these are obviously for the y-axis and 2 for the x-axis for the table movements. So aluminium handles with a plastic, so aluminium body with a plastic handle piece. Look to be reasonably well finished in terms of the bore, where they fit on the shaft, on the end of the feed shaft. No paint chipped off them or anything like that. Look to be reasonable. There's the crank handle for the head, where the head moves up and down on the column. Yeah, certainly not the best finished off. It's only cosmetic, but where you can see there's not totally sure what that is. Whether I think that's like an undercoat to the paint, but yeah, it's a bit not the best quality in the world. But I need to keep this in perspective. You know, what I paid for the mill versus what I get for the money. So decent, feels like decent quality spanner, 22mm, 24mm. I'm sure that's for head adjustment, potentially for the bolts, where you can then tip the head over and spin the head. The 3 handles for the quill, for the feeding of the quill. Again, look reasonable, nothing too nasty about them. Decent threads on them, not torn or ripped or anything. So 3 of those. A bag of Morse taper sleeves, by the looks of it, different sizes. So what have we got? 2 to 3 sleeve, 3 to 4 sleeve. And a Morse taper 4 arbor, chuck arbor. I would imagine that is for like a Jacobs type chuck. And then a drill drift and a couple of Allen keys in there. And I'm guessing this will be the copied Morse taper, sorry, the copied Jacobs chuck, which it is. It's a decent size. It's not a Jacobs. I wasn't expecting it to be, but again, well packaged, plenty of oil around it, no corrosion, not sure of the quality, can't see any maker's name. The only thing marked on it is 3 to 16, so it's 3mm to 16mm gripping capacity on the chuck. And that concludes the little accessories box. I'm not sure where I'm going with this. It'll get fitted for now, but long term I like the quick release chucks. I'll probably end up long term getting one of those, but certainly for now this will be fine. There's a chuck key in there as well, by the way. So that's they're the accessories that came with it. That's probably about the most disappointing piece in terms of how it's been finished, but it's a heavy old cast handle, that is. It's not lightweight. It looks like it's needing a bit of fettling before we use that, just down the bore, take some of the paint out, make sure it's a good fit. And I'll probably dress some of this where the paint's chipped off at the front there, and either I've got some black paint or something. I don't know what, but we'll get around to that. In reality, it will get fitted, and I'll never look at it again probably. We'll just pop these bits and bobs back in here for now. And of course, I've got no chance of actually fitting them back in here, because in usual bloke fashion I didn't look how they came out. I just pulled them out of the box, and that's typically what we do. Yeah, we'll sort that out at a later date. Now, they're obviously going to sit on the mill, not in the box, so that's not a concern. So there we go. That's the extent of the accessories that came with it. If I find anything else as I start getting into the mill, I'll obviously show that as I start getting into the weeds of pulling it off the pallet. So I think that's it for tonight. I'll not film any more tonight. I'll keep going probably tomorrow and the next night as we start to get the mill off the base, and I'll stitch that all together into some kind of episode with some continuity around it. But yeah, happy days. I've wanted a mill for years and years and years, and finally I've got one in a workshop that I can actually use. So start of the journey. So it's a good time. So I'll turn the camera off now, bring it back tomorrow when we get into lifting apart the base of the mill off the pallet in whatever form that's going to take. Well guys, I've been having a bit of a look around the mill. Not really done anything to it yet, other than I've removed, there was 4 bolts that bolted the mill itself to the pallet, and then that's sat on top of another pallet. So I've managed to remove the 4 bolts, which means the mill's just sat now on top of the pallet, so I can slide it around, move it with a bit of effort, because it is quite weighty. So I think this unit here, this whole thing, weighs 340 kilograms, or no, sorry, 360 kilograms. So I've been giving this some thought last night in terms of how I'm actually going to move this thing and get it up on top of the base once I've built the base unit. So a couple of things as a bit of an update. The base unit I'm slightly disappointed in. I've got all the bits to make the base unit up and none of the nuts and bolts to screw it together. So that's a bit of an omission, I think, on Cormac's behalf. So I will contact Cormac and see what they say about that, but certainly, you know, I've ordered myself some cap head screws and you know, assembly stuff to assemble that together myself, but I will contact Cormac. It'll be interesting to see how Cormac respond to that, you know, now they've taken the money and delivered the product, see whether the response is as good as it has been up to the point of order. That's always a good test. So I've had a bit of just a general crawl around this thing, and thinking about lifting and all the rest of it, and just generally looking at it. So what I'll just do now, just to wrap this bit of an episode up, because this is going to go on for probably 3 or 4 episodes, getting this thing off the pallet, building the base, put together. So it'll be far too long in this episode, so I'll probably shorten this one up. So I've had a crawl over it, and just some general observations that I've found. You know, it is very, very well lubricated everywhere, so all the sort of slideways, table surface, everything's really well lubricated, so that's a positive. Some of the negatives, there is some slight damage on the back, just superficial to the paintwork, and I think that's happened during transit rather than at the factory. I guess that's when Customs UK Borders Force decided they were going to break into the box to see what was inside. Other things, there's bits that are quite good looking, and there's other bits that I kind of would expect for a machine of this kind of price range, if I'm honest. So all of the lead screws have got a level of grease on them, but they look quite too dirty, but they're a little bit dirty, so they need a good wipe down and a good clean. I've not moved any of the axes yet, because before I move anything I'm going to clean everything right off, make sure it's as clean as it can be, give it a re-oil before I start moving anything anywhere. In terms of lifting, I was giving it some real thought last night, and because I've got the lathe, the mill now, and the engraving machine that are all reasonably heavy, we have got another house move coming at some point despite all this effort, and that will be in the next kind of few years, so I'm going to need the ability to be able to shift and move stuff around anyway. So I've invested in the cheapest that I could find, so it's only rated at 1 ton, engine hoist, and some slings, and the plan is I'm going to sling this thing under the head here, and up, and lift it up with an engine hoist above, which will enable me to lift the whole thing straight off the pallet, hopefully, and drop it on the stand once I've got the stand built. So that's the thinking. The other options I've got is to try and split this thing down into its sort of big component sub-assemblies, so the head unit itself, the column unit itself, and then the base with the bed on it. The problem I've got with that is there's no lifting eyes anywhere. I don't really know where the centre of gravity of any of these bits are, so lifting's going to be, it's going to be okay, but it's not going to be the easiest, and I may still have to do that yet. So what I'll do is when I sling it up and I get the engine hoist in place, we'll do some tentative lifts and just see how it's going to look, and it may well be that I still have to go down to that sub-assembly level. I'd kind of like to do that anyway, if I'm honest, just to strip the thing right down, give it a damn good clean up, and look at any of the build issues that there may be, and then build it back together again piece by piece. So we'll see how that goes when the engine lift comes. So I'll just take your handheld now and just have a little bit of a walk round the machine in a bit closer detail, and some of the things that I've sort of noticed with it, and then we'll probably wrap this episode up at that, and I'll publish that midweek, and then hopefully by the weekend then some more gear will have arrived, and I'll be able to build the base and maybe start thinking about doing some of the lifting. So apologies for the handheld, I'll try and make it as steady as I can. So what have I noticed at the top? Well, as I said before, the slideways are very well, very well lubricated everywhere. There's plenty of lubrication on. There is an attempt been made at some kind of scraping on the slideways, you can just see it there. I think that's more for lubrication, entrapment, rather than scraping these things in to square or true. Looking at the pitch between the scrapings, it's just more of a superficial attempt at a bit of scraping on the slideways, but the slideways themselves do look very flat, very well machined, So that hopefully that's going to be okay, and the true test of that will be when I start moving things around, get some clocks on it and see what we've got. I've taken this cover off the top here, this just a plastic cover, and inside you can see right down inside the main casting of the column. You can see the lead screw in there. The lead screw's greased, but it needs a good clean, really, thorough clean, wipe down, a degrease, and then re-greasing with some good quality grease. The motor looks good. Obviously that will just be a bought-in component anyway, but you know, it's a motor. What can I say until I plug it in and try it? I don't know any more about that. The this cover here, plastic cover, that comes off and exposes the top of the spindle there. The drawbar's sitting in there now. This is an interesting thing, you know. There's a good 4mm of play in that drawbar. I've taken it out and measured it, and it's an M12 thread, which I wasn't expecting. I was sort of expecting M16. So it's a 12mm diameter drawbar. The hole in the top of the spindle and all the way through is 16, so it could take a 16mm drawbar. So some of the Morse taper sleeve, so the Jacobs chuck back end and the 80mm diameter face mill that came with it, have both got 12mm threads in the back. They can both be opened out to 16. So before I go too balmy and buy lots of stuff with a 12mm thread in the back end, I'm contemplating on buying myself some 16mm diameter, either all thread or just some 16mm diameter bar, and we'll weld something on the top of it and put a thread on the other end at the right length and convert it to a 16mm diameter drawbar, which will be a much better fit in here. And I think that's something that I'm going to do. I'll do a bit more thinking on that. The gearbox oil is filled up. You can see the little sight glass there. So that's filled up. The oil looks nice and clean inside there, which is great. So there's no leaks, there's nothing visible leaking from it. It's got all of the badge plates on. Most of them are in Polish, so fairly difficult to understand what they're on about, but anyway, we've got the usual Cormac badge plate thing going on here. It's slightly better than on the bandsaw, which, by the way, I don't know whether anybody spotted that, but we'll just spin round to the bandsaw. I've repositioned that now on the belt guard, so it's well out of the way and no sharp edges, and it's fitted nice and flat and flush to the surface. So yeah, same issue with the badge plate on the mill. There's a good graticule for the head movement, and that moves all the way around, so you can set this anywhere between 90 degrees and 0, so it'll move the full way round. The column locks and the slideway locks, these are metal, and you've got this kind of flat plate riveted into a threaded unit with a slot in. Yeah, they'll do the job, but they just don't feel very nice in the hand. So I might do something with those. That's the same on all the axes, movable axes. All the axes have gibs in. So there's a gib. You can see the gib there for the column axis. It's the same for the table, the X and Y. So they've all got gibs in, which is good. And the locks themselves obviously just tighten up onto the back of the gib and lock the axis up that way, which is acceptable. That's okay as a solution. Looking at the front of the mill, I'll just put this cover back on. There's your oil fill there to refill the gearbox. I've not found the oil drain yet. Speed selection, so there's basically 3 speeds, and at 50 Hertz there's a bit of a chart in the book that shows you at 50 Hertz, and this is it's actually on here as well, sorry. So you've got 50 Hertz and 60 Hertz shown, and the speed range. So at 50 Hertz, which is what I've got, lowest speed 95 RPM, fastest speed 1600 RPM. So that's the range I've got gear wise. Interestingly, and I'd not picked this up in the sort of online catalogue when I looked at it, It's got a tapping function on it, so you turn it to tapping function. There's some micro switches in here. You set your depth that you want to go here, and when it hits the micro switch at the bottom of travel, it automatically reverses the spindle and backs the tap out, which is quite a useful function. We'll have to test that out and see how that goes. This thing, as with all these mills, that will be the first thing that comes off. This is a plastic guard, and I guess that's what they need to do to put the CE badge on it. Yeah, utterly useless, really. I know they need to put them on, but I'm not a fan of them. I think they're probably more dangerous than not having them on. They just get in the way. So there'll be a switch, micro switch in here that's either normally open or normally closed. I need to get my meter out and find what that is. We'll whip the wires out and we'll make the right connections and just hide those wires away and get rid of that whole thing out of the way. It's a bit cumbersome. Like I said, the table itself has got this kind of wax paper on it. So it's got a nice covering of wax paper over the whole table. I'm leaving that on for now until I've got it positioned. The locks for the x-axis are the same. They're massively longer than they need to be. They act on the gib strip in the same way. Again, I just don't, just the feel of these, just, yeah, I'm going to do something with that. I'm not too keen on those. You can see the gib there on the y-axis, same sort of idea. You can see the scraping that's been done on the axis. On the axes themselves, where you've got your micrometer, whatever you want to call it, scale ring, the actual lock-in screw is kind of as long as the thing's big in diameter. Again, I don't like the look of that. It's okay, it does the job, but it just looks a bit out of proportion. So I may do something with these, make something a little bit more decent for that. Other things, the spindle itself, I've not moved any of this yet, but you can see when the guy that was paid to paint red was painting, he'd either had one too many or he'd got the blindfold on, because he seems to have painted most of the bottom of the head at the same time as he was painting the red bit. So not too sure what I'm going to do with that, because if I start trying to remove that red off there, I'll obviously take the white paint off as well, so I'll give that some thought. All of these badge plates have got protective covers on them at the moment, you know, the protective polythene. I'm leaving all of that on until I've finished moving it all around. General electricity box, that's all 24 volts in there, so this all works on 24 volts. So there's a low voltage electric circuit in there, which is good. You've got an isolation switch, as you'd expect on a unit of this size. And just generally, you know, there's 4 big bolts that hold the column down to the base. There's the main cable with the three-phase plug on the end of it. Again, before I start using this in too much anger, I'm going to have this cover off here and just check the condition of the wiring and just make sure everything looks like it's okay. I've no reason to suspect it's not, but we'll, you know, for the length of time it takes to check it, it's worth doing. I should probably do the same in here. We'll whip this cover off and just check the condition of the wiring and make sure all the terminals are tight and there's, you know, it looks good. So yeah, that's I've spent a bit of time just staring at this, really more than anything trying to work out how I'm going to lift it and in what order and what width. So as I say, I've purchased an engine hoist, and the plan being I'm going to leave the mill exactly where it is, just there. I'm going to sort of sling it up around under here, so I'll have slings coming up this way and up the other side, and I think roughly centre of gravity wise that should be okay. The slings will bite in under here anyway, so hopefully I might put one set through here, and I may even put another set at the front, in front of the spindle. I don't know, because I don't want to put any undue pressure on any of this unit. It's got a fine feed for the quill here, which is driven by this unit here, so you tighten that right in, and then you've obviously got fine feed for the quill, and there's the threaded holes for the 3 handles that we looked at yesterday that came in the box. So you know, it's all what I was kind of expecting. It's in a good state. The other thing I need to do is get myself some T-nuts, so I need to break into this wax paper at some point and just measure up what size T-slots we've got, and just order some T-nuts to start with, just to get me going, and then any future ones I'll make myself. So yeah, there it is. There's a big lump of bar there that I needed to use to shuffle this thing around on the base pallet. The problem I had with you'll see these are the nuts and, well, bolts and washers and nuts. There's the bolts there, sort of big coach bolts that came right through the base, through the bottom of the pallet here, up through the base, and then a washer and a nut on the top. As I undid those and let them drop, what the problem was, they were hitting the base pallet plank, so they weren't dropping completely, which meant that you know, I couldn't get them. So basically what I've done is shuffled this pallet around on top of this pallet to the point where the coach bolts have dropped sort of through the gaps here, and I could extract them out the bottom. So that's all completely free now. I'm ready to move. And my thinking at that point was, and this was before I'd ordered the engine hoist, was to then gradually, bit by bit, lift the whole pallet up, the whole thing on the pallet, bit by bit, with the pallet truck, and just bring it up, you know, and keep putting blocks underneath, keep bringing it up a few inches at a time until I've got it to the right height, and then shuffle the machine off the front of here onto the stand. The problem with that is, I'll take you to the stand itself. This tray right at the back is the tray that the machine sits in. So this is the underside that sits at the stand, and the top side is where the machine goes, and you'll see there's a lip here of about 1 inch. So if I'm trying to shuffle the thing forward off that pallet onto that tray, I've got that inch drop to try and contend with, and it all just screams of losing fingers and toes. So that's why I've gone for you know, for what it's going to cost for an engine hoist. I'll be able to use that in future, so that's the plan. It's a foldable one, so when I'm done with it I can fold it up, stick it in the shed next door out of the way. So there we go, guys. I'm happy with that, you know, in terms for what I paid and for the service that I got. As I said in the previous videos, it's a kit of parts, as these things always are. It's going to need some investment in time and effort to make it, you know, as good as it possibly can be. But it's a good kit of parts. As the saw is, it's incredibly solid, incredibly weighty, which is good. Obviously the more mass you've got in your machine, the better dynamics you've got in terms of vibration and chatter and everything else. So there's a lot of mass in this thing, which is a good thing, until you need to lift it, of course, and then it causes problems. But I'm sure we'll get over those with the methods that I've just described. So I think we'll call that an episode in terms of the unboxing and a bit of a walk round, and then as I get deeper into the build, I'll do that in some separate episodes and bring you on that journey with me again. So thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, and we'll catch you on the next episode.